Fantastic, lovely. Hi, Bennett there. Brilliant. Okay, well, we will kick off, and I will try and juggle the letting people in as we're talking to as we go through. But huge welcome to everybody, and I'm always conscious of doing the introductions and actually to reintroduce ourselves. And some of you have heard us 100 times, but welcome to everybody. If this is your first time here, and I know we've had quite a few more people join us in the last week or so. So welcome if it's your first event. I'm Sue Anstis. I'm the co-founder of the Women's Sport Collective with Kate Hannon, who's kind of half here, half not here due to her Wi-Fi today. So she is on the call too. Exactly, moving in slow motion. And we founded the Women's Sport Collective back in September. It was the launch to the public. And I say, fantastic that we've reached 2,000 members today from women across the world, really, and across all different sports and different levels of sport. So all completely welcome and great to see so many of you here this evening. This is our second book club. So we had one successful book club last month with Anna Kessel talking about Eat, Sweat, Play, her book. And today I'm delighted to welcome Kath Spencer to join us. I'm going to do, the plan is I'll do a little bit of an intro to Kath. And then we will hear Kath and give a couple of readings from the book, and then I've got some questions. I've got lots of questions for Kath actually, but I'd really like to hear your questions too, and some of you have kindly already shared some questions to me, but if you've got other questions, please do put them in the chat function and we can take you off mute. You can ask them yourselves or I can ask them for you, but it'd be really good to make this as interactive as we can and to get people to be asking their questions too. So I'm going to do a little bit of intro, and you probably correct me if I get this wrong, Kath. But Kath's former captain of the England rugby team, so she was named England Player of the Year in 2006 and received a Rugby Union Writers Club Special Award in 2011. Kath scored 18 tries, which is quite good from number 8, I think, for England, and won 6 of the 8 Six Nations competitions that she took part in. She played at Worcester and Bristol on Aylesford Bulls Ladies and retired in 2011, having founded the speaker agency Inspiring Women, which I think is probably where we first came across each other a couple of years ago, way back when. And she's gone on to new adventures since then, which I'll let her talk to us about, which we should hear more of later. And Kath's also patron of the Tag Rugby Trust, so it'd be good to hear a little bit more about that too. I didn't realise this until I was researching you actually, that you were honorary doctorate from Canterbury Christ Church University. So I wonder whether maybe I should be calling you, are you Dr. Spencer? Is that how we need?
I think it's really the done thing to yeah. I had a nice day out and had to wear a nice hat and things like that, but it hasn't had a huge impact on my life. But it was very nice. It was very nice. I feel very honoured.
Excellent. No, it's fantastic, isn't it? Just to add to it all. So I will, if it's okay, I'll pass across to you, and I say if you're happy to do some readings for us, and then people please do share your questions in the chat function, and we'll come on to ask some more questions too. So thank you so much for giving your time, and I'll pass across to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sue. I feel quite scared following Anna Kessel. I mean, what a start, but I will do my best, because she's like, she's a proper writer, author, isn't she? But there you go. I shall do my best. I'm just going to, I won't read the whole book, don't worry. I just thought I'd read just a couple of short extracts, really. I know some of you might have read it, some of you won't have read it, but I will uncontroversially start at the start and do a little extract from the beginning and a couple of others, and then we'll go on from there. Here you go. On 5th of September 2010, on the morning of the World Cup final, The Independent on Sunday ran an article. When asked what we would gain if we won the World Cup, my reply was, just the glory of holding the World Cup. That's enough. That's all it was about for me. That is what everything was about, but I never got my enough. In 2014, I was working as a studio pundit for Sky Sports, watching the England women's rugby team win the World Cup. I watched with envy as the captain, Katie McLean, lifted the World Cup trophy aloft. I watched with immense agony as former teammates and friends showed such joy on their faces. I knew the extremity of their emotions, because at that exact same moment, I too had tears streaming down my face. But my tears were shed for the hurt that I'd felt 4 years previously and will always continue to feel. Just as extreme as their elation, but a universe of emotions away. A wound that had started to heal over 4 long years was now destructively torn open in just a few short minutes, whilst watching England women finally win and lift the coveted World Cup. In 2006, I had to stand with my teammates at the end of the World Cup final watching New Zealand celebrate their win after a game that we could have won. In 2010, I had to watch my opposing captain, Melissa Rusco of New Zealand, take to the podium and lift the trophy after we lost by 3 points in a game that we should have won. In 2014, I watched England women win a World Cup final after I retired. I felt bitterness, jealousy, pain, and massive hurt. If England had not won in 2014, my own 2006 and 2010 World Cup final wounds would be 2 scars I would feel proud of. Now I'm ashamed of them. Now that England women have won the World Cup after my time, I feel that my battle scars are worth nothing. Because what do you really win becoming second? So to lighten the mood a little bit, I'm going to read a little bit of an extract about my home club. So most of us, I think, on this call who work in sport have got kind of a connection to a community club or a home club, or where our kind of love for sport started. And for me, I put in the chat earlier, I'm calling in from the centre of the world, also known as Folkestone. Well, actually Hythe, just down the road from Folkestone, Kent. But this is actually where I grew up. I'm back down living here now. So I'm just going to read a little extract about my home club. And I played, Folkestone was a small club, and I played with them right from the beginning, from about the age of 8 in mini rugby. And then I played with them when they started a women's team, and I stayed with Folkestone when I played for England. I was quite stubborn. I wasn't going to go to one of these Premiership clubs. I was going to stay at Folkestone. So I remained with them while I started my England journey. So seeing Folkestone RFC listed in my club on the England programmes was awesome. And it was the prospect of this tiny little thing that drove me on. Folkestone, apart from being my first club, was the club where my dad played, and the club where my 2 brothers played, and the club where some of my best mates played, and the club that we used to head up to every year a few days before Christmas when we were little to get presents from Father Christmas. It was the club where we used to go every November to watch the firework display. The club where, age 13, I enjoyed my first slow dance with a boy at a French exchange trip party. It was the club I went on to enjoy many tours with when I was a little older. I won't say anything about those tours. It represented so much, and I loved playing for England while playing for Folkestone. I became the player and leader that I did because of this, but it did mean that I had to fight a little harder emotionally in order to get there. I went from being a big fish in a little pond to relatively small fish in a massive ocean. An ocean that was scary, but full of possibilities. It's kind of like read a little bit about my kind of England World Cup journey, read a little bit about my kind of Folkestone home club connection that we all have. So I'll read a little bit about being a woman. Writing this, I asked myself that if I had a pre-birth supernatural power, would I have ensured I was born male, so that I would not have faced all of this discrimination over the years, so that I could have been famous and in possession of a significantly larger bank balance? The answer is no. Not because I don't want to be male, but because I do like being a woman. I liked being a girl when I was growing up. And I like being a woman now. I also tell people that I enjoyed playing rugby at the particular time that I did. To experience the growth and development of the game firsthand, and knowing that you've had a direct impact on that, is heartwarming. Yes, it could also be frustrating, but looking at the bigger picture, I'm happy about the time that I played. I've enjoyed converting men's rugby supporters to purely rugby supporters. And in my recent years, I've enjoyed promoting female leadership and sporting success stories through my company, Inspiring Women. And if I had not been born female, I would not have experienced the highs and lows of my formerly disastrous, but more recently very happy love life. My search for Mr. Right, like my rugby journey, is also rather like a roller coaster. There were many troughs, many troughs. It did take a few years for me to successfully navigate myself down an aisle, and I do wonder how harshly my rugby career impacted on my quest to find love and happiness. There are 3 short extracts. Sue, do you want me to do any more?
No, that's lovely. We might come back for more in a moment. Someone's not on mute that's come on recently, I think. Oh, hang on. There we go. It's the power. I have the power to mute people. Sorry if you were having a conversation there. Thank you so much. That is really fantastic. And I think you should say, so give it a flavour across the book there. I've definitely got some questions to start with, but and I've got a few from other people who I'll ask to ask those questions too. But please do just type away. If you've got a question, you can tell me what the question is, or just say that you'd like to ask a question, and we can get you to come off of mute and ask that question too. So I guess just almost setting the scene back from when you first wrote the book. I'm interested to know why at the time you felt you wanted to write it, and what you were feeling at the time that you made that decision. Was it something you thought about for a long time?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, yeah, a lot of us think, oh yeah, I'm going to write a book, and we don't often know, do we? And years ago at university, I kind of several attempts at starting to write a book, fictional books, various things, and they never got very far, really. Kind of the back of a beer mat, and that was about it. And then I sort of involved, I guess, in more kind of media stuff through England, and particularly through becoming captain, and started writing more articles for kind of rugby publications, rugby paper and things like that. And I was really enjoying the writing process. And then, like all of us, I'm just so frustrated about the lack of female sports books out there, particularly kind of autobiographies, really, and kind of fighting for this kind of or fighting to redress the balance. I really wanted to help contribute to that. And so that was kind of the bigger picture stuff. And kind of selfishly, I was like, yeah, I want to do this for myself. And it was kind of a form of therapy in a way. You know, you kind of have this career, don't you, this international career, and then suddenly it's like, oh, where does it go? Where's it gone? And how do we kind of keep hold of it? And it felt nice to be able to kind of like package it up literally in 2 book covers, and I've got it there, and now I can kind of like move on and do different stuff. So there was kind of different reasons for doing it. One, because I wanted to hopefully see more female sports books on bookshelves, and also it was a form of therapy for me as well.
Did that have more pressure, do you think, the fact that there aren't very many female autobiographies out there? And
it does. I think a lot of us, and it's very sort of prevalent at the moment, isn't it, the focus on any kind of female in the sports world, and a few of our sort of commentators, broadcasters, all hugely talented and suffering kind of the abuse that they need to. And it feels like whenever we do anything, we're under this massive magnifying glass that anyone feels that they can kind of comment on. So it does feel that there's sort of a bit more pressure, really. And I suppose I was quite anxious to sort of see how it would be received and how it would be reviewed, and on the whole it's been pretty positive, so I can't really complain. But it was kind of, and it's a very emotional book, kind of starts up from the beginning. It's literally me on paper, so it felt very connected to me. So it was I was quite anxious about it, and being a female book as well, I'm sure there are people very ready to kind of criticize it if they could.
And I was going to ask you about the response to that, and I guess you are quite critical of the RFU and the kind of wider rugby world, perhaps, in it. Was there any backlash, any negativity that you heard about at all?
No, nothing that I've heard about. Yeah, no one's on the phone, and yeah, I felt that I wasn't too horrible, but I felt that perhaps the RFU and wider rugby circles could have done a bit more to help promote the women's thing, certainly. And I didn't want to kind of, the book is all about honesty, so I wasn't going to say things I didn't agree with and didn't believe in. But the response generally has been really good from sort of the rugby world, and actually the RFU have been quite nice to me recently, so I don't really know what's going on. So yeah.
And is there anything that you didn't include that, looking back now? I was just talking before we came on, actually, I was lucky enough to come to the launch of your book, but it was only in 2020. Like, it feels like it was such a long time ago. It was just that little bit pre-COVID. But is there anything, it's not that long a time, is it? But when you look at it now, is there anything you think, and even when in those months after, that you thought, oh, I wish I'd included something at all? Is there anything?
Yeah, it's really difficult because in some senses it is a memoir or autobiography, whatever you want to call it, but there's lots of references to the wider game and kind of how the game's moved on, and sort of references to former female players in the media. And actually this last year, you know, Nolly Waterman, Maggie's still going strong, isn't she, at doing, and I kind of referenced that a little bit in the book, but actually the amount they're doing now is fantastic. It's really good to see. So it would have been nice to kind of captured that in the book, but there's always going to be something that's changed, you know, isn't there? And hopefully all the time in women's sport. So I think it'd be difficult to get a kind of it all in the book. But when I was writing it, so I did have to kind of go back a couple of times and update some things. But I think I'm happy with the general content.
And do you want to tell people about what you are doing now? Because actually it's quite, I mean, at the end of the book, it's almost as if you could have gone that route of more media and commentary and so on. But what are you doing now?
Yeah, I'm still doing little bits and pieces of that, but very different. I don't know if you can see, actually, they're not there on purpose, but on my bookcase here, there's books and folders and things for marking. So I'm now actually a year training to be a teacher, secondary school teacher. I'm doing my school direct training this year, and it's something that I've thought about for a long time. But this partly I had my daughter, nearly a couple of years ago, 21 months nearly. So that kind of impacted my business, my speaker agency a little bit, because my time was a little bit prioritised elsewhere. And then just as I redid my website, I was about to relaunch Inspiring Women, and obviously COVID hit, which has affected pretty much all of us, hasn't it? And particularly running a sort of event speaking agency, hit that quite hard. So it kind of encouraged this kind of decision to make this move into teaching, and I'm really glad. I'm really glad it did. I'm really enjoying it. So kind of still keeping Inspiring Women going, but I think for my sanity, I'll always be a rugby supporter. I'll always love the game. I need to kind of break free a bit more. So I'm not PE teaching, but I think the school have told me already, and they've told me already they want me to teach PE next year. But it's not the subject I'm training in, but yeah, I'm really, really enjoying it.
And does that excite you, to sort of bringing girls and boys into sport and potentially rugby? Where are your thoughts on the sport now?
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage any young person or older person to just be active, you know, like I kind of said in the book actually at the end, with my daughter, I'm very happy for her to play any sport as long as it's not football or sevens. Sorry if there's footballers or sevens fans here. But yeah, I'm only joking really. I want them to be active, particularly at the moment when we're spending so much time on screens, aren't we? And I'm teaching kids every day that are sat in front of the same screen every day. We're all working, aren't we, sat in front of the same screen. I just want people to be active. So actually, if I can play a part of that in my teaching career as well, I'll be very happy about that.
I've got a few questions that people had sent through to me. So Ailey, is that how to pronounce your name, Ailey? I'm sure, I think. Yay! I did check on Google beforehand, actually. You've sent me loads of fabulous questions, so go ahead and ask whatever you'd like, because they were all fantastic.
I know, I'm just such a big fan, Catherine, so wow, thank you very much. I was going to ask, obviously we come from a multi-sport background, Scottish student sport. What can those of us in the multi-sport sector do for rugby in particular? And I'm kind of thinking in terms of the growth of the women's game, but also that kind of retention, because there's always a massive drop-off in teenage rugby. How can we try and keep them in the game a little bit more?
How do we keep them in the game? Is that your question? Yeah. Oh goodness. I mean, there's always a massive drop off with boys as well, isn't there? At that age group, kind of 14, 16 plus. So it's kind of makes sense in a way that there'd be that drop off in girls, but we just don't have such a big pool, do we, to kind of lessen the impact. I think girls generally, we're worried about what other people think, aren't we? So the school I'm teaching in now actually is a mixed school, girls and boys secondary. And I wandered over to watch some of the PE lessons the other day, and they were doing football, but they split into two pitches, and they're girls on one pitch and boys on the other pitch. And it was just like watching two different lessons really, because the girls just didn't want to show that they were making effort. And I think we're too worried about what other people think. I think there's been some really, like the This Girl Can campaign, I think is brilliant, isn't it? And this kind of, I think there is a bit of a move that we can kind of get in the gym and be strong and all this stuff. I think that's brilliant. I think the next stage is just kind of helping us to accept that it doesn't matter what other people think. I think that's the difficult step, I think. But I don't know, I did work in sport development for a little bit, or rugby development, but I'm not really an expert But I think the more visibility we can get on TV, in the papers, in bookstores, the more support we can show each other. Hopefully, the more, you know, the girls growing up will grow up to think that actually this is normal, this is okay, it's not abnormal. You know, and that if they do it, they're not gonna have the magnifying glass over them. You know, we could have shattered a few magnifying glasses, and they can just get on with doing what they're doing.
Hayley, do you want to ask your other two questions, because they're both fantastic? One about coaching and one about, I guess.
I know, I just couldn't help myself. I'm really sorry. Yeah, so I suppose following on from that, I mean, I suppose that's what women's sport really just generally is, about visibility. But I was going to kind of ask on that coaching side, if we were to increase the more female coaches that we had, sure, that would make a difference as well. But I suppose the question I actually had was, you were talking about in the book the disaster of the 2017 World Cup, and how you sort of had predicted that from just seeing the kind of growth of the sevens game and other things. And I was kind of like, why aren't there more female coaches than there kind of currently is, especially at that international level? Like, I suppose you see in the boxes, it's just full of men, you know, which is fine, but yeah.
Yeah, I know, and that is a really good point in the female coaches, and I think we are starting to see more, and actually RFU are doing a good job in promoting some more female coaches at a higher levels, like Rocky Clark, Tamara Taylor, Vicky Macker, whichever is her name at the moment, and I always forget, Mans Bennett smiling, so they're doing a really good job. Jo Yapp's another example, Susie Appy, so they are in rugby, they were starting to sort of push more, you know, but we haven't had as many females coming out of the sport as men coming out of the sport. And I also think also, and this is a generalization completely, and you know, perhaps preaching to the wrong audience, but I think also as women, we feel that we've got all the other things that we're responsible for in life. And once we may have finished playing in a sports club, I don't know if we've got that same, some of us are different, I'm different, I grew up in a club, but I don't know if we have that same attachment to stay embedded in the centre of like a sports club. So once we're playing, we're like, right, I'm off now, I need to go and do this, I need to go and do that. And I think we feel guilty for putting perhaps too much time into sport or something. But also I think it can be quite intimidating. So I did my level 2 coaching, and I did it through the RFU, but I ended up doing with a bunch of people from the army. It was quite nice, quite enjoyed it, with about 21 army men and me. It's nice. But if I hadn't been that confident in rugby, I'd be really scared. 21 rugby guys, and I was the only female on this coaching course. And it was a bit intimidating. I can understand why perhaps some females are a bit scared of it. And again, the RFU have put on all female courses, I think. Something that I tried to do years ago, and I was kind of pushed back. I wasn't allowed to do it, but I think they are doing it now, which is good. But yeah, so I think it's a mixture of lots of things, Ailey. I think it's the kind of the confidence to actually say, yeah, I'm good enough. I know enough. I can do this. So I think confidence is one thing. I think access to coaching courses, and whether that's more courses or perhaps more flexible timings, and the kind of the acceptance, not feeling guilty, kind of spending time in sport away from home life or something else. I think it's just we're quite complex, aren't we, us women? I think there's lots of different reasons, but I think perhaps having a more female presence. But I'm against kind of, it has to be female coaches in the female game, or it has to be female referees in the female game. I get very frustrated when perhaps female officials or female referees are kind of fast tracked through the women's game and used at a level that they shouldn't be at yet. So I'm definitely against that. But I'm for there being more coaches and more referees, and it'd be great if the balance of females increased in that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hayley. Millie, is Millie on the call? Millie McAvoy.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, actually, you're right beneath me on my screen. I should see you there. Lovely. You could ask. There's two fantastic questions. Are you happy to ask your questions?
Yes, sure. The first one I had was if you feel like able to talk about it around concussion and the recent news of it being linked to dementia. I was just wondering if you'd had any experiences with concussion, and also maybe looking more widely, the fact that women have been found to be potentially more susceptible to concussion, but also have the longer impacts. Was that something you ever felt affected your game and your rugby career?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? And I know Alex Popham quite well. He's leading one of the projects around concussion at the moment. I've just actually signed a letter with him to send to Bill Beaumont. So it's, yeah, rugby's a contact sport, isn't it? I would always want it to be a contact sport, and I wouldn't want that to change. And there are obviously dangers and risks that come with that. I think now, particularly at the top end of the game, people are getting kind of stronger and fitter, and we've got all these like 8 substitutes now that can come on as fresh players at the end of the game, and these impacts. But it's not something that's affected my. I mean, I hate Jesus. I'm one of these players that when I played rugby, I'd get a bang on the head, I'd shake my head and think I'm fine and keep going. And there's a big culture of that in rugby, and I think there still is. And also the nature of the game. Sometimes you're under a pile of bodies and people don't see what's happening, or you get a knee or a foot in your head and you felt it, but no one else can see it. So a physio or a doctor or a coach wouldn't see it. And you've got a culture, right, I'll keep going. And I definitely was a player that did that. And perhaps I shouldn't have done that. I think there was only one time I really was properly concussed, I think, in a game I played against. I carried on playing. But afterwards I didn't feel right for a few days. And then on the other side of it, I feel really bad. So Kat Merchant in the women's game, who was an amazing winger for England, scored a huge amount of tries. She had to retire early because of concussion problems. And the other side of that, one of my favourite ever tackles ever was when I played for Bristol and playing against Worcester, which was Kat's team. I played number 8 and she was on the wing. She's one of these fast people. And I remember thinking all game, I'm just going to track Kat Merchant. I'm just going to track her. And she came down the side of the wing and I did one of these like back row dream, like covered across, and just smashed her into touch. And I was really chuffed with this tackle. But she knocked her out, I think. At the time, you kind of like, I was really pleased with this tackle. Brilliant. Like, if you catch her back, like, that's brilliant. Particularly a winger. Oh my God, have I contributed to her having to retire early? And it's all these different kind of debates. It's really hard. And I think one of the big problems is the use of substitutes. And I would like to see them have less substitutes in the game, so that we're not bringing on these kind of fresh, kind of fit people through the game, and more space will open up. I think there perhaps needs to be more research in the game, more support for people if needed. Definitely more support for people when they've retired, not just for concussion, but for other areas as well. But I don't ever want the contact to disappear out of rugby. We have to go into it, I guess, knowing that there are risks involved. But I think Millie, you're right. I think there probably definitely needs to be more research into the effects on women and whether that's different from men. But will that then deter people away from the game? I don't know.
Difficult one, isn't it? Millie, do you want to ask that's a fantastic question. Would you like to ask your second fantastic question?
Yeah, sure. I should have said at the start, I absolutely love the book. I'm not a particularly quick reader, but I just devoured it. It was great. And this probably shows it, because I've got page 73 as reference for this, is that you said that women, or the women you played with, were too emotional when they considered their performances, and that they weren't able to kind of separate themselves from their performance. Yeah. I was just interested to know, in terms of the game moving more professional and in the England women having full-time contracts now, do you think that will have changed in that it will have got more or perhaps less?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm quickly going to page 73. Yeah, no, it's something I feel like as women we're kind of, for example, we're on a rugby pitch and we've made, I was about to say 99 good tackles. That'd be quite impressive to make 99 tackles in a game. So we've made like 25 really good tackles, like brilliant, really good tackles, and we missed one tackle. And we come off the pitch and, I missed one tackle, and then like, I missed a tackle, I'm a bad person. we really struggle to separate that, or like I was rubbish at passing. Amanda Bennett will know this. I wasn't very good at passing. My strength was running into people. That's the way it was. So I wasn't very good at passing, and sometimes that I would struggle with that. But you have to kind of think, actually, it doesn't make me a bad person because I can't pass very well on a rugby pitch. And I think it is a bit of a generalization again. I think it is a bit of a female trait. We feel like, I remember one particularly awful feedback in 2005 in New Zealand. We lost to New Zealand, and we went out there for 2 tests. We lost both tests, but we lost the second one better than the first one. That didn't make sense. We were better in the second game. We weren't very good in the first game, so we improved a lot. But the feedback after the first game was just terrible, the way it was done. And he just sat there thinking, oh, we're just awful people. We're really bad people. no, we're not. We just no one goes out intentionally to kind of make an error or not play very well or make a mistake. But whether that will change really with professional, I guess maybe it will in some ways. You know, it becomes people's jobs, doesn't it? Perhaps it might be easier to kind of compartmentalize a little bit, but we're still people, aren't we? Still got these things called emotions and feelings, no matter how much we're paid. So I guess it's just being able to kind of manage it and learning techniques to manage it and learning tactics to manage it, and with that becomes more access to kind of analysis or psychologists or kind of self-reflection, you know, and that kind of thing. So I think maybe we'll always be a bit rubbish at it as women. But we need emotion in sport, don't we? I think some of the best performances are driven off emotion. We just have to fuel it in the right way, don't we? But we do. I think we need to be able to. One thing that is a good thing out of sport is learning how to kind of receive feedback, isn't it? And constructive criticism. That's what we want to call it. It's quite a difficult thing to do, and I think sport teaches us that fairly well. How
are you with negative book reviews? I don't envy you that part of it.
So when it first came out, you kind of obviously Amazon is not the only retailer of books out there, as I keep telling people, but they've done pretty well, haven't they? But you kind of, it's difficult to get, and you know, unless they're kind of formal views in the paper, you find yourself, don't do this when your book comes out, you find yourself kind of scrolling through the reviews on Amazon and like, oh, how many people, and you can look at your Amazon ranking and where you are in that particular hour, and it becomes a bit silly really. And most of my reviews have been really good, and I had one really, really bad one, and it was a really interesting one, and it was quite I felt all right about it because I'd so many nice reviews, but then I was kind of like, I'd quite like to know who they are.
I want to know who it was. I know the one you mean, and I remember thinking, I wonder who she is, because she said she was professional.
I know, so I kind of feel like, well, I just quite like to sit down and say hello and kind of learn more. And I think because it is such a personal book, I'm like, oh, she doesn't like me. So it's kind of, yeah, but generally the big reviews have all been pretty good. So I think if I would have struggled, I think, if main sort of, if it hadn't been so well received in the kind of the media and the sort of book award type things. I think I would have really struggled with it and probably would have wanted to hidden under my duvet for a long time.
It's very personal to put yourself out there in that way. So that leads me nicely into another question. Sarah Canton, in terms of autobiographies, would you ask your question? That's a great question, actually.
Yeah, just like, I'm really interested in autobiographies because they're written from one person's perspective, and I just wondered if anybody had challenged you on your perspective of an event or something that you wrote about in the book, and whether that made you then think, like, how did I feel? Because your book made me reflect on something in my life, and I wondered then if someone had come back to you and gone, did you really think like that? Or
I don't think they have. I mean, one of the negative reviews was like, they said it was a bit self-centered, and I'm like, well, it's an autobiography. That's kind of the whole point. But anyway, don't buy that. But no, I think no one's really done that. But speaking to a few of my former teammates, they kind of like, oh, I'd forgotten about that. Or everyone kind of forms their memories slightly different, or remembers things in certain ways, or something that's really significant to someone is not significant to another. So quite a few of my teammates have been like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, or oh, that's quite strange, or you know, but no one's actually. I love your question. I wish I had a good answer to it. It's really good, but I remember it, and I'll let you know if anything does come up. Yeah, no one actually has challenged it, which is quite nice. I'm quite pleased about that in a way. But yeah, people have commented on kind of like different members, and I remember actually I went and listened to a talk that Sarah Hunter did, who's a captain now, who I played alongside for a while, and she became captain, and it was quite interesting hearing her talk and what was significant for her. It's quite interesting. But no one's challenged me yet. Maybe it will happen.
Jess, do you want to ask your question, Jess Barrows?
Yeah, hi. I was really interested when you were talking about how removing the barriers of actually just getting women playing and seen as equals to men in the game, basically kind of moving into the professionalism, might actually be removing slight toughness on the field, you know, almost removing that like need to make an impact and prove a point, like we deserve to be here, which I found really fascinating, because of course you're going to go out every single match with not just feeling I need to play this well. For me, I need to play this well almost to make a bigger point on the wider scale. So I was just wondering, obviously, the wider sporting sector is looking to remove barriers for women all the time. You know, the point is that we're getting more people in, and professionalism is on the whole better because it is kind of gaining that equality with men. But we don't want to lose the toughness on the field. We don't want that to change. So I don't know, you know, if that's something that you still think, and also if that is the case, then how do we keep that toughness but keep removing barriers and prevent, you know, the loss of a change in the game?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. That's really. I mean, sort of the toughness I guess I'm referring to is kind of people that I used to play side, like someone like Rob Clayton, who Amanda will know, she was just a bit of a legend of the game, but she just went out and absolutely fight every game because she just had to work so hard to get there. And I feel like my sort of 2006 teammates, we were all having to, like, you know, get up early before work, or like, you know, or go and train 9 o'clock at night when it's cold, it's wet and it's muddy, and we're running shuttles up and down a really boggy rugby pitch somewhere. Or like, it wasn't easy. We had to work really hard to be organised enough in our life to be able to kind of get to our, you know, to reach our kind of the standards required to play international sport. And I think that kind of toughness and that kind of I suppose awareness of where the sports come from and what people have done kind of before us, and naturally as time goes on that's going to be lost a little bit. And now people, particularly as a kind of they're kind of like, oh, this is their job. Are they going to have different challenges, aren't they? When your salary is dependent on it, your performance requirements change slightly, don't they? Because if you don't perform, you're not going to get paid, are you? So there's different, I'm not saying there's not challenges now, and I don't know, I'm a rugby fan, but watching the men's game, I don't enjoy watching it so much now. It's a business really now more than it is a sport, and I don't overly enjoy watching it, and I don't want the women's game to go down that same route. But as you say, I am a fan of equality, and that's why I really hope that's why I like the fact that some women are getting paid now. But I wanted to keep it its true kind of sporting heart.
Unmute myself. I was going to ask you, I am on the Game Changers podcast, a little plug for the Game Changers podcast there. But I often ask people how they feel now. They look back at their career and they see women being professional or having contracts, and they invariably say, oh, it's amazing, and I trailblaze for the future, and you know, I set this path, I don't regret it, I don't resent what's coming through. And you're quite honest in the book that you do with it in terms of looking at the success that followed. So do you think that, without your judging other women, do you think that other women also feel that, but they just don't say that everyone's really positive as if they're trailblazing for the future? Or so do you think you were just really honest in your response to saying, actually, you did feel a bit jealous and a bit angry about the success that followed?
I think other people think that as well. Well, I know they do, but I'm not gonna
it wasn't to name and shame, but it's just interesting.
Yeah, I think I made the decision to be very honest, and the book wouldn't have worked if I didn't. And that meant, yeah, detailing all my emotions and actually feeling a bit jealous and a bit bitter about the success of some people now. And yeah, not everyone, some other people feel a bit like that.
It seems like an obvious way to feel. I feel like if you played 30 years ago, then now you see people playing professionally and having contracts and all that goes with that. Actually, but it's been very natural. Then why would you not be a little bit resentful that you didn't have that earlier? But people invariably don't say they are. They say, "Oh no, I just feel like
brilliant.
pathway for the future." Yeah,
yeah. I know exactly. Or I think there's this kind of fear as well. If you've kind of, whether you wanted it or not, if you've kind of led this, I say career without being paid, and you kind of been in this position and you kind of had a bit of a glimpse of this kind of you've kind of become this sort of identity or person, and then you've stopped doing that because you're retired, and all these other people are doing this, and all these other people are kind of named. You kind of feel a bit like, hang on, no, I did that, or I did that, and there's this kind of like this worry that it doesn't matter, does it? But this worry that people will kind of forget you in a way. I don't know if I've explained that very well.
I read in the Abby Wambach autobiography, she says, there's someone interviewed her and said, what do you want? She said, I want to be forgotten. I want people not to know me because I want to have made so much of a difference that my name as the best US soccer player isn't there. And actually then she tells a story that she went to an event and the kids didn't know. So what sport did you play? And actually she really hated that they didn't know who she was, although she'd made this big Nike ad saying, my future is to be forgotten and not to have made an impact.
I always, you know, and I always say, you know, we want equality, we want more people to do this, we want more people to do that. But then actually I was like, when I was starting out in my speaker agency, I'd go to lots of kind of rugby business events. It was very useful for me being one of the only females, because people more like to remember me and things. I was kind of, I don't want those females in the room, because, you know, so it's kind of it's a bit of a two sides of it. But yeah, really generally I'm on more kind of, you know, equality obviously, but there is kind of a personal, is it selfish, I don't know, human nature side to everyone, isn't there, that we can't get away from.
Yvonne, do you want to ask your question in terms of leadership? Are you on the call?
Yep, here.
Lovely.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, you know, what or where do you think we can make the most impact as leaders within national governing bodies or even within grassroots rugby without waiting for that full culture change to happen?
Oh goodness, or do we have to kind of push the culture change, don't we? I think Katie Sadlier is the new kind of World Rugby manager, and I quite like her. I've got quite a bit of time for her. I think she's done quite a good job in Nans probably knows more about this than me, probably should ask her. I think she's done quite a good job in getting more females on certain boards and onto committees. We have to be careful, don't we, because we have to make sure people are on there because of the qualifications, the skills, the experience they have, not just because they're female. So it's a fine balance, isn't it? But we also need to kind of push this cultural change and also kind of show other people that, oh, you can be on there, you can be on a board, you can, you know, you can have the confidence to do that, you know, as females. It's a bit of a fine balance, isn't it? So I kind of think we can't wait for a culture change. We have to push it, don't we? But we talk about boards and we talk about the top end of games. Well, actually it feeds up from the bottom. You go to like so many, talk about rugby, but clubs up and down the country where the committees are mostly men. It might have a social committees, female maybe, but you know, kind of the committee are mostly men, and that, so you get that from club games, and then that will obviously feed up to kind of county boards, where it's, so the county boards are mainly made up of males because they feed from the clubs, and then so the county boards, they're then what's nominated into the national boards. So obviously they're going to be mostly men because the county are mostly men and the clubs are mostly men. So we've got to try and kind of perhaps change at the top end if we can, where we can have influence. But a lot of it is down at club level, isn't it? But then that comes back to females are not kind of spending so much time in the clubs after they've retired. And why is that? And the different reasons for that. So we've kind of got to attack, and we pinch and move attack from both ends, the top and the bottom. The bottom end is just going to take a lot longer, isn't it, to kind of infiltrate up into higher levels. But at the same time, when we've got this kind of increase in kind of media profile, that's going to help as well, isn't it? But I think we've got to do that thing, haven't we? We've got to kind of like push the culture, but we kind of, as women, we've got to do it, but we've got to make the men think that they think it's their idea. So I do my husband every day.
Thank you, Yvonne. Amanda, do you want to ask your question in terms of advice for a young player?
Thank you. So, hi, Kath, how are you doing?
Very good.
Great to be doing this session. Yeah, just thinking everything you talked about there about the growth of the game. And I have to say, you know, your perspectives on what players are achieving now and the rewards and benefits that players are receiving now. And I just remind you that they do stand on the shoulders of giants. So and one of the giants being you. And I'm just very, very grateful that I retired before you hit your zenith, quite frankly, so I didn't have to tackle you. Anyway, coming back to my question, so just noting the evolution of the game generally, and a young player, 17, 18, 19, 20, who's clearly remarkably talented and comes into the England fold, you know, if you were going to give us some advice, your experience of, you know, the rarefied environment of being in a high performance or world-class performance program, preparing for a World Cup, you know, and you took them aside for 5 minutes, what sort of advice would you be giving them?
My goodness, 5 minutes. It's one of these really difficult questions that you want to give a really good answer to and you have to think about. I don't know. Do you know what one person said to me, that when we're in sport and we're at that high level, aren't we, and we're trying to make everything right, we're trying to sort of focus on those 1%, aren't we? And like me as well, I needed to work on my passing and all this kind of stuff. But the thing that really helped me in the England setup was knowing what I was good at and then building around that. So to put it simply, I was kind of good at taking the ball forward and kind of taking out defenders, I suppose, and then and everything else could spread from that. So for me, it was kind of focusing on my strength, knowing kind of what my identity in the team was, and then working around everything else. So kind of knowing what you're good at, I think, was the main thing that really helped my confidence. That was huge for me. So I think that would be kind of a big piece of advice, I think, someone playing. And then, oh goodness, I don't know, it's just small steps, isn't it? I don't know what else. Everyone's different, aren't they? I suppose there'd be different pressures now, wouldn't there? Because we didn't have the media scrutiny back then that they are starting to get now, which is good. You know, we don't generally, the media that we got in our time was generally nice, because it was people that wanted to write about the game and they're being proactive about it. And as time goes on, as more mainstream media writing about it, it's going to be more sort of negative scrutiny in a way, or more objective feedback following matches, which would be quite hard to deal with. So I couldn't kind of focusing on on yourself, isn't it? But goodness, I don't know. Yeah, I think, Amanda, in purely terms of sort of rugby, I think actually knowing what you're good at, focusing on that, making that better, and then the other stuff you can work on that as well, I think. And then, yeah, probably in terms of life, rugby's not everything. Do something else. And I think the best sports people are the best people. So kind of having something else to look at. And like, I worry, Amanda, about some of these people, and I kind of did when I was retiring, that they were playing rugby, they were working in rugby in some ways, they were sharing a house with 3 or 4 other rugby players, and I worried about those kinds of people. And I kind of then there has to be other stuff. And sorry, this is going on now, isn't it? It's waffling a little bit. I've gone over the 5 minutes.
Yeah.
My 5-minute
got
answer
bored
was
now, that girl. Yeah.
know what you're good at, and kind of use that as your real kind of strength, I think.
That's interesting as well. That's a great question, Amanda. But that whole idea of your superpowers, I know Kate Richardson-Wolf talks, the hockey girls, the GB hockey girls that won in Rio, talk about that, identifying what your superpower is and celebrating that and working on that. That's a good life lesson, really, isn't it? I'm looking at messages coming here. Kat, do you want to ask your question? Kat.
Hi, Catherine. I was just really, also, just to start, I thought I'd read your book absolutely ages ago. So when Sue said it wasn't released until 2020, it's blown my mind, to be honest, how time flies. But I just wanted to ask you, you talk obviously quite passionately about how you want equality for the women's game, but then equally you talk about how there's things about the men's game that you don't particularly like, and you presumably wouldn't want to see the women's game fall into some of those traps that you don't like. So I'm just quite interested to know what you would take or leave from where the men's game is now for the women's game, and kind of what you see, what your ideal image is for the women's game in the future.
Oh goodness, that's another really good question, isn't it? Oh goodness. I've done a day of marking as well, so my brain's a little bit scrambled. That's all right. I kind of, yeah, it's hard, isn't it? The men's game, as I said before, it's become a business, hasn't it? And I understand that we need funds to go into the game, doesn't it, to keep our product at a certain level. But then when kind of sort of TV rights becomes more important than the game itself, I find that a little bit challenging at the moment, and kind of things are dictated by that. Salaries of some male players are going up and up and up, and that worries me, because at the end of the day we're just running around a pitch for 80 minutes. Like, there's people that deserve more pay than we do. So I find that a little bit hard, and I kind of don't want it to go the same way as football. We're people, we're in the community. I love the accessibility of rugby. We're starting to lose that in the men's game, or we have lost it, but that's a massive plus in the women's game, the accessibility of top level players and high level players. I don't ever want that to disappear. I hope that always stays, whether that's, chatting on the edge of, the side of the pitch at the end of the game. I remember when I was a rugby fan, I've always been a rugby fan basically since I was born, but we'd go and watch what was called the Pilkington Cup final at Twickenham. So it was a bit like the FA Cup, it's like the men's rugby cup final. I'm a Bath fan, Bath supporter, so they used to be good. So they'd be in the final every year at Twickenham. And I remember these memories of it. And then the final whistle would go, and the crowd would just run onto the pitch, and the players would still be on the pitch, and they'd be mingling there with each other. And it was just an amazing atmosphere. And obviously nothing like that can happen now, can it? We've just kind of lost that that accessibility, and there's probably health and safety or whatever, and we can't ruin the lovely pitch. So kind of like there's aspects of that, the pay, and and all these players that have got agents who are basically just want to make a huge amount of money, and so these contracts decided because of agents, and I find that a little bit difficult. And these players become products, don't they, and not play. And so I think it's kind of the business side of the men's game, which I understand we kind of need. I don't want the women's game to do that. And I also, another thing I say, Kat, is that and this is probably going off track a little bit, but I agree with equality, and I at the moment the women's are getting paid by oh sorry Viv, oh you play for Bath, oh amazing. So I was just looking at the chat. At the moment top level women getting paid by by their country, which in terms of getting towards equality I agree with, but I don't think anyone should be paid to play for their country. I think you should play for the sake of paying for your country, but you can get paid by your club, that's your kind of day job, isn't it? But so there's all these kind of people saying, oh yeah, but if they're providing the entertainment and all these fans are paying to come and see the game, then they should be paid. I'm like, well, I don't know, no, put this money back into the game where we come from. They're doing pretty well as a club game. But yeah, so there's kind of the inaccessibility, the kind of business side of it, the kind of the stuff that happens in offices and not on the pitch. Not a massive fan of, and I hope it doesn't go too far like that. The kind of player transfer from sort of club to club, and I know it doesn't happen all the time, does it? And actually some of the men have stayed with Saracens, haven't they, this year, but have been relegated. So that part of the game, and the other part is just the meddling with the laws all the time to kind of suit a few men's teams. And obviously the women are playing by the same laws, it's kind of affecting that as well. I kind of don't really like that, the meddling with the game. And I just, I sound like an old oh, it was much better back in 1995.
Oh, it's tricky though, isn't it? It's tricky that wanting professionalism and people to be, it's that equality and to make a professional sport. I'm conscious we've got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 more questions. Heather, do you want to ask your question? I think it's been important, I guess, with the Six Nations and obviously the event being separated this year for the women's game, but great question. Do you want to ask your question?
Oh yeah, thank you. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts. It's a really hard question, but obviously the disparity between the countries that compete in the Six Nations that have professional contracts for their players, and then the others who are working maybe even like full-time and training and everything else. Just any wisdom on that really about how that could change?
Yeah, I've written about it quite a lot actually. The rugby paper, I'll try not to waffle it too much because I understand the time. It's very difficult, but I think it's right that say France and professional England, professional. I think it's right because we need that to happen to move the game on. I think, and there's other nations, aren't they, getting left behind. And I did kind of say I wonder if Six Nations is fit for purpose now. So the structure's a little bit changed this year, and it's happening in April, isn't it? I think there should be promotion and relegation in the Six Nations. I think that in the men's game and the women's game. I feel quite strongly about that. And I think that would hopefully, in an ideal world, kind of help to develop some of it, or push or encourage some of those governing bodies that are perhaps not supporting those women so well. That would be my hope, I think. If they're not, there may be other nations that are willing to support their women, and they will come into kind of the top flight of rugby. But I think it's really difficult, Heather, and I don't think having games that one team is scoring a huge amount more than another team is that helpful. It does happen in the men's game, and it has happened in the men's game in World Cups and stuff like that. Japan got absolutely trounced a few times, and then they beat South Africa in a famous game in Brighton a little while ago. So kind of helps to move countries on, but obviously need the support of the governing bodies. Was that a bit of a waffly answer, wasn't it?
That's good. They're good questions though, aren't they? Blimey, keep on your toes. Emma, I think we've got time for one more. Emma Lewis, do you want to ask your question?
Thank you. Hi there. What key skills would you say that you learned from your rugby days that you've then taken on that have helped you in life, sort of particularly from your leadership perspective?
I learned a huge amount amount being captain. I say in the book, actually, I love being an England player, but I actually love being captain. I didn't quite realise it at the time, and I wish I'd kind of carried on a bit longer. So confidence was the main thing, but pretending to be confident. I learned I had to kind of do that when I became captain, and that became a sort of skill that I used when I started my business as well, going to all these big meetings and big corporate places that I'd never been to before, and I was absolutely terrified, but kind of living this kind of confident air that I knew what I'm doing and I should be there. That was one thing. And in terms of leadership, the big sort of key thing for me was understanding that I couldn't please everyone all of the time. And as simple as that sounds, as soon as I kind of like had that discussion with someone, it was like this weight had been lifted. I was like, really? That's what I've been trying to do, and it's been so difficult. You know, with a team or group of people, you're not always going to be that person that's going to be the best communicator with everyone. So you can't please everyone all the time is kind of a key thing that I learned, really, and it just yeah, helped me enormously. I could go on about it, but we've only got 2 more minutes, haven't we? So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm really conscious that it's bath time at 6 o'clock, so for your little one. So we was making sure that we finish on time to go off to the rest of your life, really, as well. But thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been absolutely brilliant. I think we packed in so many questions in such a short amount of time, but really appreciate everybody.
Really good questions as well. Thank you. They're making my brain hurt a little bit.
No, it's fantastic. Lots of thought-provoking stuff there. So I really do appreciate people taking the time to ask questions too. I'm just going to plug 2 things, which are next